Well, good evening, everybody. This isn't a shave blog, it's not a gaming blog, it's not a reviews blog, it's none of those kind of things at the moment. As you can probably tell, it isn't going to be a shave blog, not with this little lovely. But I thought I would do something on a topic which I have been kind of thinking about for a while now. And it's all about the subject of kind of what people call ufology, if there is such a word. These are the people who kind of go around and look into suggested encounters with craft, with things that can't be identified, and they go to conferences and all this kind of stuff. Now, probably the first thing to say is what my own personal belief on the matter is. I would say that I would be very surprised if in a trillion galaxies and a trillion worlds that we were the only living beings in the universe. I think that's just statistically. And one thing I find quite interesting from a lot of Christians is that, for example, they'll say things like, well, we're clearly the only people on the earth. And you say, really? Well, I don't really think that makes sense because, the universe is there to glorify God, so why would he only put life on one planet? And believe it or not, even C.S. Lewis, when asked this question, I think he says something like, if we ever did meet aliens from another planet, we shouldn't preach the gospel to them because God might have a different plan of salvation for them. I don't know. It's weird and wacky, sort of all this Christian thing. But yes, I'm perfectly happy to entertain the idea that there are other species in the galaxy. I'm perfectly happy to accept the idea that there are advanced species in the galaxy, many millions, if not billions, of years older than we are. If you look at the history of the Earth, life has only been on the Earth for I think it's about half of its lifetime, actually. I think if the Earth was definitely a couple of billion years old before life originated here, there's no reason why on other planets it couldn't have happened earlier. And therefore, gives them a huge advantage in terms of research, technology, all the rest of it. But there are a couple of things I will say. First of all, a lot of the stuff that is sort of put online as, this is a UFO. You're right, but 9 times out of 10 it's really not what you think. It's a plane, or it's a Chinese lantern that's just sitting there and glowing in the middle of the night. And I know that these things can look really weird. What annoys me is the fact that, like most of these kind of things, it's become an industry. And because it's become an industry, and because it's become a kind of subculture of mainstream culture, and all of this stuff kind of does tie into itself. So you'll find that people who are, who are believers in ufology are also into various other kind of conspiracy theories and all the rest of it, blah 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 blah, which I just think is a bit sad. Actually, I mean, can you imagine how much money it would actually cost for half of these conspiracy theories to actually work? Just there's not enough money, and it would take one person to blab it, and the whole thing would go down. So I just think it's really, really silly and a bit funny. But the thing that annoys me, like I said, is the fact that there are so much like hoaxing going on and all the rest of it. And if you want, and you can just go on YouTube, just Google UFO, and look at the number of things. And there are certain keywords that we use, like Planet X, Nibiru, Armageddon, End of the Age. You just go on, you can find like tons of this crud. And the thing that annoys me is the fact that this is this is making money off people, because you see these people who are like, new UFO footage, click here to see more. Yeah, and it's some clearly like CGI'd thing, or that stupid noise that was originally, I think originally came from Russia, and then everyone was like making hoax videos like, what's that noise? Funny that you're immediately in the right place at the right time with a video camera. I mean, what are the chances? Some evil random noise. Actually, if I remember correctly, I think it was a linked. I think I remember this right. It was a weird sound effect that came from a stadium, because the stadium during a baseball game had been hit by lightning, and this set off a weird kind of feedback in the audio system within the stadium. That got recorded. That was then ripped out of it by various hoaxers, and they were then sort of overplaying it. These are the same people who talk about things like chemtrails. All this kind of stuff comes together into this great big ball of complete nonsense, which is perpetrated by people who, don't forget, and this is something you really should remember, every time that you click you click through on one of these videos, it's got like 100,000 views or whatever. If they've got adverts enabled, they are making money out of that. So, be a little bit wise. Someone's constantly posting what is clearly mocked up footage, and you're lapping it up like a dog. You realise you are basically feeding them money, don't you? And it's in their interest. It's totally in their interest to post this kind of sensationalist, ridiculous stuff, because it gets hundreds of thousands of views, because it is an area that people are genuinely interested. I mean, it's a genuinely interesting topic. Let's not pretend otherwise. And I think it's kind of gone mainstream as well. If somebody asks you today, do you think extraterrestrials exist, and you say yes, people aren't going to look at you funny. I'm sure that there was a time where people were like, ooh, have thou grown this to another head? But today it's a fairly kind of accepted view, and as I said, even with, various people of various faiths, we just, fine, why not? But, like I said, there are a lot of charlatans out there, so my advice to people who are looking into this stuff and are watching this kind of stuff, number one, if it's a video of something like a space shuttle or whatever, and you see like a long thing move past, someone's like, that's definitely a UFO. Any idiot could sort of surmise that it's not going to be a UFO. It's going to be a bit of fuselage. If you've ever seen the size, think about this. Think about the size of the rocket that goes into space, and think about the size of the craft that actually lands on the moon. There's an enormous amount of rocket that's suddenly disappeared. Now, I have no doubt that some of it will have ended up back in the, will have fallen back to the Earth and burnt up and be in the ocean, but I'm quite sure that there's quite a lot of crap floating around in orbit, frankly. There's a lot of space junk, old satellites, old bits of, propulsion, fuselage that have fallen away from rocket propulsion, other bits of junk, small meteorites, etc., or rocks that are in orbit of the Earth. There's an enormous amount of stuff, and do you really think that the people who are narrating the video, who are saying, let's say it's this discovery, undocking from the International Space Station, if there was something weird, do you not think they'd be like, huh? Huh? They don't seem to care. I love the idea of a conspiracy that people are just completely like putting it out there. I mean, how inept is that? It's a conspiracy. We're trying to stop anybody seeing it. Oh, look at this giant thing floating through the backdrop. Well, no one will notice. Don't be silly. If people are going to cover stuff up, they'll cover stuff up. If there was a giant worldwide conspiracy, people are not going to be stupid enough to let actual stuff come out into the public domain. Are they? So don't be silly, Don't click on videos as well that show the corona of the sun and show slight alterations in the magnetic field. And people are like, that's clearly a UFO. No, it's not. It's particles hitting the flipping camera. And this is what I mean. Because once you strip away all this crap, and once you strip away all the rubbish about, New Age, David Icke, just don't go near that stuff at all. That is weird and in partly kind of occult and satanic. Don't touch it. It's weird. It's dangerous. And okay, I'll be blunt. Most of these cults, L instead of N, but most of this stuff exists for one very simple purpose: to make money, to make people feel scared, and if you're a woman, to get your pants off and get you into bed. That's what it's about. Okay? You remember like the Mayan calendar 2012? I bet you any money that around the world, some big, bearded, ugly hippie was telling a 21-year-old girl that she had to go down on him, otherwise the world was going to end. Okay? Most New Age religions, most cults, are about sex. They're about sex. Most of this stuff is about sex, okay? They can dress it up in all the kind of traditions as you want, but at some point, some girl or some guy is getting told, yeah, you need to take your pants off now. Underwear for American, North American viewers. Sex has to happen now. It's part of your spiritual awakening. No, it's not. It's because someone wants to bone you. It's not complicated. People have been inventing reasons to convince other people to have sex with them for a long, long time. Like alcohol. That's a pretty good reason. Anyway, back to the thing. But yeah, all that kind of New Age cultish worship is bunkum and crap. Ignore all of it. Ignore the stupid, obvious CG stuff. Ignore people who are telling you they're channeling their inner dolphin, although that is a very funny video, which you really should watch. Because once you get past all of that, there's like a 1%, 1 or 2% of the videos, etc., that are just weird. And that you can't write off. And that's the stuff that interests me. Okay? I'm not sure if people are actually being abducted. I am quite sure it's possible for your brain to overwrite incredibly traumatic experiences so you don't really remember them. And what's easier to admit to yourself, that you were molested as a child or that you were abducted by aliens? You know, you can't really take any of that stuff for granted. It's very hard to be definitive about any of that stuff. Something definitely did happen to these people. I think you have to be absolutely ridiculous. You would be a moron to suggest that something genuinely traumatic has not only happened, but is perhaps even continuing to happen to these people. But the point I would make to you guys is, don't take anything at face value. You should always be a skeptic. The idea that people saying, well, you know, you're being controlled, you don't understand all this, man. Or the best one, of course, is you don't know you're being controlled, which is, of course, yeah, fair, fine. But you don't know you're being controlled. Yeah, okay, I'll give you that. But neither do you. But always be a skeptic. Always go in asking the difficult question. You know, someone who says, well, I went to MIT and I worked at Nevada. Okay, then show me your photo of your graduation, or show me the photo of your matriculation. You know, if somebody is trying to sell you, people have been trying to sell each other moonshine and snake oil for hundreds and hundreds of years. You know, the old Wild Western guys who used to draw up in a town with their fabulous elixirs that would these are those people who are now going to UFO conferences and standing up and doing that, or going to New Age conferences, or going to people are always going to have charlatans. And whenever there's a belief, whenever people are interested in something, not only are you going to get people who are going to take advantage of people, emotionally, sexually, you're also going to get people who are going to try and get money out of people. Don't be silly, okay? Don't be a fool to think that people aren't going to try to exploit this stuff, because they clearly do, and they've made a huge career out of it. I mean, some of them have made millions and millions and millions of dollars out of this stuff. Now, maybe they are telling the truth, or maybe they're just or maybe they're lying. And this whole thing about, he's taken a lie detector test. Yeah, but a lie detector test only tests whether you believe what you're saying. And if I tell myself I'm a sheep every day now until 2050, I'm probably going to believe I'm a sheep. Doesn't mean it's true. Believing something to be true is not the same as it being true. Passing a lie detector test means nothing compared to actual empirical evidence and, a mind that is going in, looking to challenge what you're being told. Okay? But like I said, you take all that stuff apart and you get down to the 1 or 2% of cases which are very, very hard to answer. And to me, the sort of hallmark of what I would call authenticity is people who really don't want to be on camera. It's the pilot who is sitting there talking about his experience and is clearly incredibly nervous and thinks no one's going to believe him and thinks he's a complete idiot and has probably been told by his wife, don't go on. It's that kind of person. It's your average Joe or average girl who doesn't really want, isn't interested in celebrity, doesn't go on talk shows, doesn't create a speaking tour about my experiences, because actually to them it's a personal thing. It probably freaked them out. And they're the ones I'm more entitled to believe, because they are doing it partly maybe not under duress, that's not fair, but they're not doing it for any kind of gain. They're doing it because something really weird happened to them and somebody has asked them to come on and talk about it, and they do it, but they don't want any fuss. They just want to say what they did, and then that's all you'll get out of them. If you have to pay someone for that kind of information, then that tends to suggest to me that it's not really on the level. Okay? And all these things like, ancient aliens and stuff like that. Let me just make this point about that thing, and I can't remember what the guy's name is, but if I just say big hair, you probably know who I'm talking about. How can you possibly take anyone seriously with hair like that? It's like, bah! You know, take me really seriously. I don't think so. But, you know, and again, that all that, you know, History Channel stuff. I love the fact that History Channel is basically showing complete rubbish, but all that stuff taken together, again, is just contributing to the huge amounts of pre-processed balls, which actually gets in the way of the 1 or 2% of stuff that really is interesting and can't be explained. And you've got people like Nick Pope, who used to work at the MOD. You've got various other people who, you know, are looking at this material. And the very best kind of people to me are the people who have worked on it and still don't believe. Because they are the ones who are not going to... They have no interest in it being real. They just will tell you what they think of the material. I think that we unfortunately are now in an age where anything that's shot on film can't be taken as rote. In the sort of 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, before digital technology, before Photoshop, before, you know... I mean, we had a film a couple of years ago, which a guy... what was it called? I can't remember, it's sitting in there. But basically a film about this couple going through what was a sort of a quarantine zone where aliens had landed. And this guy, they did it on a shoestring budget, and the guy did the visual effects on his laptop. And it looks as good as anything you'd seen in Hollywood. So if you can do that, you know, and if anybody can now just buy this software for a couple of £100 or, you know, even cheaper, then it becomes very, very difficult to be absolutely sure that you're seeing anything authentic. It's the reason why I'm more interested in much older shots from the sort of 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, because at that time this kind of technology wasn't available to the general public, and you know, it was extremely difficult to do. I mean, I'm sure some people could do it and some people could put money into doing it, but those are more definitive and more authentic to me because the chance of them having been altered or having been doctored is so much less. Now, you know, today everyone's got a video camera. Everyone can potentially become a star by photographing an alien. But I just think that, like I said, I think most of it is complete, like 98% of it is complete rubbish, or can be explained away easily. I mean, if you see like an orange light sort of glowing in the sky, it's going to be a lantern. Let's be honest. But the other thing point I would like to make is, are you going to really suggest to me that something that has thrown hundreds of thousands of light years is going to, and has managed to evade all of the kind of very sensitive and very high-tech detection systems that we currently have, particularly here in the West or, you know, United States or Europe, and yet it's just sitting there in the sky hovering around and you happen to catch it on film? I just think that's a bit weird. Don't you? Do you not think that they would be a little bit more sensible? You travel all this way, you avoid all the detection systems, and then what? You turn off the cloak and you just sit in low orbit and just like, it's going to sit here. It's going to observe the people of Earth. Have a fag. Whatever. I just find that very, very difficult to believe. I think like I said, I think there are a very small number of films or photographs where there is something that I simply cannot identify as any kind of Earth craft and is clearly moving at a speed and velocity, as in change of direction, and in actual speed, is such that no human pilot could possibly fly that way, because if you did, you know, the forces would tear you apart, and you know, all of this kind of stuff taken together, as I said, I am quite happy to believe that we have been visited. But I am sick to death of reading about Nibiru and Planet X and about all this other bullcrap, because, you know, as I'm just going to put the power on, because as somebody made the point, when Halley's Comet or any comet comes out and something is hundreds of millions of miles away from the Earth, or not, you know, isn't any threat to us or whatsoever, NASA, etc., will come out and they'll do a press conference and they'll put photos up and they'll be like, oh, it's a comet, you can go out and see it. If a planet was approaching us, I think they might tell us. Just a thought. And these doomsday prophecies. I mean, you're just being some miserable people, actually. And again, that's the other thing I would say. There is some definite truth in the fact that people who paranoid, not schizophrenics, that's not fair, but people who are genuinely paranoid, think the government are out to get them, think everyone's out to get them, think there's a global mass conspiracy. Most of the time, I'm not sure these are people that you should be taking incredibly seriously. I think you should treat them with a pinch of salt. And I think, as I said, that if you really want to see something genuine, you're going to be looking for the person who is really embarrassed about talking about it. Particularly airline pilots. You know, pilots, I'm sure, see a hell of a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff they don't report because who'd believe them? But it's when you get that guy who sits down and looks kind of awkward and clearly feels like he's talking rubbish, he's the person to listen to. The guy posting about chemtrails or oversounds or any of this other bunkum is doing it to make money out of you by channeling you to their channel so that you will watch the videos and they'll get the advertising funds. Don't be so damn stupid. And don't be prepared to not, to accept the fact that you thought you were filming some kind of alien craft and actually it turned out to be a lantern or a weather balloon. There you go. That happens quite a lot. Just accept it. Like I said, 98% of this stuff is either hoaxed or is just filmed, of a perfectly explainable phenomenon, which you just happen to catch at an angle and you can't quite see. Okay, fine. But concentrate on the 2%, because that's where I think the interesting stuff is. And that's where I think that the research should go into. And I do think there are people out there probably doing very good work, going around documenting all this stuff, just keeping tabs on it, because it's an area of study. It's a perfectly reasonable area of study, both from a empirical scientific point of view and also from a psychological point of view. What are the things that make people believe they've had an abduction? What are the if it is a purely fantastical belief with nothing to back it up, what are the causative agents? What are the personality types that it's more prevalent, to which it's more prevalent? Is it specific to men? Is it specific to women? Are there age differences? All this kind of stuff I think is an interesting scientific inquiry. If it's just on the basis of not something actually being there. On the other hand, it could, otherwise it's worth documenting from a study of sort of anthropology, etc. What is it about? And that's the other thing. The last thing I would say is, if we are to be believed, these things have been going on for decades and decades and decades. Lots of people being abducted, blah 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 blah. How could they possibly learn now that they haven't already learned? No idea. It's the one thing that you never hear about. You have all these videos and all these things. The one thing you never hear about is, what is the agenda? What could you possibly want? A breeding program? Why? And what possible hybrid could survive? Body parts. Well, why not just grow your own humans? Why not just confiscate a human being, a male and a female, get the eggs, get the sperm, and grow yourself a constant stream of clones? Why do you need to keep doing it? Why do you ascribe human limitation to something that is clearly would therefore be more advanced than a human being? I find that very strange. If it were me, and I had that kind of technology, I would visit Earth once. I would get what I needed, and I wouldn't come back. Because I'd got what I needed the first time round. Why would I constantly turn up to bugger people? Unless it is actually not happening, and the brain is creating a scenario that a young mind or an adult or an older mind can handle, because the truth is just far too painful. I think there's probably quite a lot of that in there. I think quite a lot of the cases where, for example, women have been supposedly abducted, I think they've been raped. And I think it is just too painful for them to admit that. And even under hypnosis, the damage to the brain just shuts down. The brain just shuts down to protect it. And actually, you do see something similar actually for women. For example, in childbirth, women can't remember pain very well, and actually the memory of childbirth is blocked out. All of the endorphins and all the other stuff going on actually shuts the brain down in such a thing, so that women don't remember it. That might be a very similar occurrence happening in some of these cases as well. And I think these people need to be treated with care and to get a help that they clearly need, because having these episodes is not conducive to a good, healthy human life. So I think they deserve compassion. I don't think they should be paraded on TV and forced to constantly undergo hypnosis, which constantly forces them to remember, which is going to be doing serious damage to their mental state. That's the other thing I don't like. He will now undergo hypnosis. Well, the brain has created a lot of ways to protect itself from those kind of situations. If it's done that, it's probably done it for a damn good reason. And every time that you force someone to relive it, even if it's the reliving of a simulation that the brain has created to protect it from the worst of, it's still going to do damage. You pull the scab off too many times, you create a scar. It doesn't heal properly. So I think a lot of this stuff, as I said, worries me greatly. Yeah. That was a bit of a long rambling video, wasn't it? So what conclusions can we draw? Don't watch these videos with 100,000 views plus, because it's rubbish. Don't believe everything they tell you. Don't click on things about sunspots or coronal ejections, etc. with spaceships, because it's not right. Don't click on videos about the ISS showing thing. Don't click on anything that says revelation of this, because it's clearly just trying to suck you in. It's hit whoring. Don't be silly. Do watch documentaries interviewing pilots. Don't watch anything who claims to have worked for the government or the CIA or any of that kind of stuff, because you have no way of knowing if that's true. If somebody refers to himself as a physicist, what does that mean? None of that stuff. Listen to the pilots. Listen to the low-level personnel who clearly, feel uncomfortable about talking about what they're talking about. And have fun.